"You're old, Mama. What do you need land for? Sell it. You can't take it with you when you die." That was my son talking to me. My own son. I want to say that plainly, without cushioning it, because this story only makes sense if you understand who stood in front of me that night. Not a stranger. Not a man I once loved and divorced. The man who spoke those words was the child I carried, the boy whose scraped knees I cleaned, the man I worked double shifts to educate and protect. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 68 years old. I am a retired nurse, a widow, and the mother of one son named Deshaun. And the problem I faced was this. Deshaun wanted me to sell our ancestral land so he could pay debts he created through gambling, partying, and trying to live a life he could not afford. When I refused, he decided humiliation would succeed where persuasion failed. The land was never just land. It was 12 acres outside Greenwood, Mississippi, bought back by my grandfather in 1939 after he finished laying railroad tracks by hand. My father cleared it tree by tree. My husband planted a pecan tree there the year Deshaun was born. My promise to the dead is buried in that soil. I told my son I would not break that promise. I told him earlier that day in my kitchen. "I'm not selling it," I said, steady and calm. "You made those debts. You pay them." He stopped pacing and stared at me like he didn't recognize my face. "So you're just going to let me drown?" he asked. "I'm saying what my mother told me," I replied. "You owe, you pay. That's how life works." That's when his voice changed. He started calling me selfish, backward, ignorant. He said I was choosing dead black folks and dirt over my own son. He said I didn't understand money, didn't understand the world anymore, that I was old and useless and scared of change. When he realized he couldn't bully me into signing anything, his words turned uglier, sharper, meant to wound. I should have stayed home that night. But I went anyway, to the dinner at his wife's parents' house, because mothers are trained to believe showing up can still save something. The table was long and heavy, set with linen napkins and polished silverware, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans swimming in butter. I arrived early with a dessert I baked myself. No one hugged me. No one asked how I was. I took the seat nearest the kitchen, the one that says without saying that you are temporary. Grace was said. Plates were passed. Conversation stayed polite until Deshaun leaned back in his chair and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, Mama, did you come ready to do the right thing?" I felt my chest tighten. "I already told you," I said. "That land is not for sale." His fork clattered against his plate. "Unbelievable," he muttered, then louder. "You'd rather see me ruined than loosen your grip on something you don't even use." "I'd rather you learn to take responsibility," I said. "Your debts are yours." That's when he lost control. He grabbed a spoonful of mashed potatoes and flung it at me. It hit my chest, warm and heavy, sliding down my blouse. The room went quiet. Someone laughed nervously. No one stopped him. His wife's sister leaned forward. "Evelyn, maybe you should think about it. You're not exactly in a position to manage property anymore." His mother-in-law nodded. "At your age, simplifying life is wise." Then his wife smiled. Not kindly, not embarrassed, amused. "She's just stubborn," she said, glancing at me like I was something misplaced. "Old, black, and stuck in the past. She doesn't have the capacity to understand real business." That word capacity hit harder than the food. My hands shook. I reached for my napkin and knocked my water glass over by accident. It spilled across the table, soaking the bread, dripping onto the floor. I heard a sharp intake of breath from someone. My face burned. Deshaun stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly. "Look at you," he said. "You embarrass me everywhere you go." I opened my mouth to speak, to apologize for the spill, to gather myself, to salvage whatever dignity I had left. I never got the chance. His hand came across my face with a crack so loud it echoed off the walls. Pain exploded along my cheek. Tears sprang to my eyes before I could stop them. I tasted blood. Someone gasped. Someone said his name. No one moved. I felt the second slap before I saw it, then another, and another. I cried then. I couldn't help it. Tears streamed down my face as my son hit me, my body frozen in shock, my heart breaking in a way I didn't know was possible. I wasn't crying from the pain alone. I was crying because the boy I raised was hurting me, and the people around us were letting it happen. I counted in my head because counting was the only thing I could control. 35. 35 times my son struck me while his wife watched, while her family sat silent, while my food grew cold and my dignity bled out onto a white tablecloth. When it stopped, he was breathing hard, his hand red. My lip was split, my cheek throbbed. I wiped my face with my sleeve and stood up slowly. "Get out," he said, "and don't come back until you're ready to act like a mother." I looked around that table one last time. I waited to see if anyone would meet my eyes. No one did. I walked out into the cold night air, my tears finally falling freely. I sat in my car and cried, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, broken sobs of a woman who had just lost her child while he was still alive. If you felt her pain, hit that like button and drop a comment to tell us what city you're watching from. You might not be alone. That night, I did not call the police. I went home. I washed my face. I changed my clothes. I made tea with shaking hands. And as I sat alone in the quiet, something inside me hardened into resolve. Deshaun believed he owned the house he lived in because his name was on the deed. What he forgot was who made every payment when the bank didn't trust him. What he forgot was whose credit built that life brick by brick. I didn't seek revenge. I prepared to reclaim what was always mine. Because a mother can cry and still decide she will never be struck again. I didn't sleep that night. The apartment was quiet, but my mind wasn't. The echo of his hand against my face kept replaying, over and over, 35 times. I knew the number because I'd counted, and now I couldn't uncount them. Each slap had its own memory now. The first was disbelief. Surely he didn't just raise his hand to me. The 5th, shame my blood on my lip while strangers looked away. The 20th, clarity my boy was gone. And by the 35th, I felt nothing at all. Only silence. A silence that screamed louder than anything else in that room. I had walked into that dinner still thinking I was somebody's mother. I walked out a woman without a son. I sat by the kitchen window, the same spot I always came back to when I needed to think. I'd had that chair since the year after my husband died. Worn cushions, one leg a little short, but it held me. That night, it was the only thing that did. My tea went cold as I watched the lights across the street flicker off one by one. Families going to bed, dogs curled at their feet, couples brushing their teeth and saying goodnight like it meant something. I held the teacup in both hands just to stop them from shaking. I wasn't afraid of Deshaun. Not physically. The bruises would heal. My lip would mend. What scared me was what had changed, what had died. That look in his eyes, disgust, entitlement, hatred, wasn't something you could take back. And it hadn't come from nowhere. He hadn't just started resenting me last week. No, that resentment had been growing for years. I'd seen it in the way he stopped calling me Mama and started calling me Evelyn when no one was around, in how he laughed harder at his wife's jokes when they were about me, in the way he started introducing me as my mom, she's retired now, with that little shrug that said, don't expect much. He was ashamed of me, and shame, when mixed with desperation, becomes dangerous. He thought I'd forgotten who paid the down payment on that house, who begged the bank officer to give him a second chance when his credit was so poor the loan officer laughed out loud, who worked the night shift for 12 years to cover the mortgage he left hanging every time he changed careers. I remembered, and I also remembered the promise I made to myself back then, when my husband passed and I was left to raise a half-grown man by myself. I would never beg for love from someone who should give it freely. That promise was burning in my chest now like a warning flare. I got up from my chair and went to the bathroom. The mirror didn't lie. My left cheek was swollen, a reddish-purple bruise creeping from the edge of my jaw to the curve of my temple. My lip had stopped bleeding, but it was cracked, dry. I took a wet cloth and dabbed gently, flinching when the sting cut through. I didn't cry again. I'd already used up all my tears at the end of that driveway. Instead, I looked at myself the way I used to look at patients in the hospital after something terrible, not with pity, but with a quiet inventory of what could be done. You lost a son tonight, Evelyn, but you didn't lose yourself. Not yet. I walked back to the kitchen and took out the old tin box I kept in the back of the pantry. Not the one with photos that one lived in the closet. This one had papers, records, notes my husband had written before he died, legal things I never wanted to touch until now. At the very bottom was the mortgage contract, 17 years old, faded ink, but the signatures were still legible, mine and Deshawn's. I flipped through the statements. Every payment came from my account, my checks, my hours. The house was in his name only because the bank required a younger borrower on the application, someone still in the workforce. I had already turned 55 when we started that process. They said it was for loan viability. But everyone in that room knew it was about race and age and assumptions. They trusted him because he was young and had ambition. They dismissed me because I was older and tired. But ambition doesn't pay bills. Steady hands do. I closed the file and rested my fingers on the cover. The truth was clear. He had the name on the deed. But I had the history, the receipts, the blood and sweat that made that house a home. And if he thought he could beat me into giving up the only thing I had left, the land, the dignity, the truth, he was about to learn how deeply mistaken he was. I stared at the clock. It was 2:13 a.m., too late to call anyone, too early to sleep. So I wrote. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started listing everything I would need to do. 1. Call Kenny at the bank. 2. Ask about title law. 3. Meet with Mr. Halton, my husband's old friend, retired lawyer. 4. Check if the contract includes contribution clauses. 5. Find out if I can sell the house. And then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote something I didn't plan to. Forgiveness is not permission. That was my mother's saying. She used to whisper it when she cleaned the church kitchen after services, when no one else stayed behind. She forgave many things. But she never let those things rewrite who she was. Neither would I. I went to bed around 4, only after the sun had started brushing against the blinds. I didn't dream. The next day would be the first step toward reclaiming what was mine. But for now, in that still moment between night and morning, I felt one thing for certain. That 35 slaps would not define the rest of my life. I left the house without looking back. The night air bit at my skin, but it was the silence that followed me like a shadow, the kind of silence that meant no one ran after me. No voice called my name. No one tried to explain. Not even a, wait, let's talk. Nothing. Just the soft hush of a well-manicured suburb pretending it didn't hear what happened behind closed doors. My shoes clicked against the driveway like an unwanted echo. I got in the car. Sat in the driver's seat with the engine off. My hand hovered over the keys, but I didn't start it. My fingers trembled just enough to let me know the adrenaline hadn't faded yet. That kind of trembling wasn't from fear. It was from grief. It was from the quiet death of something I had clung to for too long. Hope. My phone buzzed in my purse. A message. From Marissa. My son's wife. Sorry you had to leave so early. Hope you're okay. No punctuation. No mention of the 35 slaps. No acknowledgement of what she saw, what she let happen. Just hollow words pretending to be kindness. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then dropped the phone back in my bag. I drove home slowly, keeping both hands tight on the wheel. My neighborhood was quieter, older, rows of brick houses with chipped paint and chain-link fences. A woman walked her dog past the corner store, nodded at me through my window. That nod meant more than that message ever could. I parked outside my building and sat there for a while, my thoughts thick and heavy. I had to face it. I wasn't just unwelcome in that house. I was invisible. The next morning, I woke up sore. My face ached, and my heart felt heavier than my bones. But I got up. I made oatmeal. I watered the plant in the corner. I tried to keep moving, like I always had. But something had changed. By midday, I heard a knock. 3 taps, sharp, confident. When I opened the door, Marissa stood there. She was dressed in a beige trench coat, makeup flawless, holding her designer purse like it was part of her spine. I didn't ask her in. She didn't wait to be asked. I wanted to check on you, she said, glancing around my living room like it was a crime scene. I sat down in my chair. She remained standing. How's your face? She asked, voice smooth, like she was commenting on the weather. I'll live, I said. She nodded. You know Deshawn didn't mean it like that. He's just under pressure. The business, the loans, it's all gotten really overwhelming. I didn't hit him when I was under pressure, I said. Her lips curved into a smile. Not warm, not cruel, just practiced. You always had a dramatic way of making things about you, she said, setting her purse down on the coffee table without permission. You've always liked being the martyr. I blinked. You saw what happened. I saw a mother who pushed her son to the edge, she replied. You embarrassed him. In front of his family. That land is nothing but a patch of memory. He's trying to build a future. With what? Blood money? She rolled her eyes, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. You're not getting any younger, she said. We're offering you a way to downsize, relax, not worry about the things you can't manage anymore. Isn't that what people your age want? I laughed once, dry and humorless. People my age want respect. Then she said it. The sentence that would burn itself into my skin far deeper than any slap. Honestly, Evelyn, sometimes it feels like you think being his mother means you're entitled to something. But you're not. You were just the vessel. You're not part of our life anymore. You're just the woman who gave birth to him. I stared at her. You mean to say, I whispered, I'm just a woman who gave birth to your husband? She didn't blink. That's what I said. I stood up. Get out. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I said, get out of my home. Don't be foolish, she said, reaching for her purse. We're trying to help you. Once the house is sold, I stepped forward. That house is mine. Her mouth dropped open, just a little. No, it's not, she said. It's in Deshawn's name. And who paid every mortgage check? I asked, voice rising. Who cooked meals in that kitchen? Who patched holes in that roof? Who paid for the fence, the water heater, the tile? That deed might say his name, but that house was built on my back. She stared at me, startled. Then something behind her eyes shifted, something cold and calculating. You're making a mistake, she said. You'll end up alone. I smiled. I already am. She walked out without another word. I sat down, knees trembling. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I didn't do either. I simply sat still until the ticking of the wall clock was all I could hear, and then I stood up and went back to my papers. I found the file my husband had once called the insurance policy, the one with the copies of all the checks, the receipts, the notarized letters, and in the back, folded in half, was a card. My husband's handwriting still neat. If anything ever happens, go see Halton. Mr. James Halton, my husband's old friend, retired but still sharp, still licensed. I picked up the phone and called. I need to talk about a house, I said. Come tomorrow morning, he replied. Bring everything. I hung up and felt something return to me. Not joy, not peace, but power. Just enough to carry me through the next day. I arrived at James Halton's office 15 minutes early. Old habits die hard. Nurses don't show up late, especially when the matter is life or death. And though no one lay bleeding on a gurney this time, something in me understood this meeting would decide whether I continued living bent over or finally stood straight. His office sat above a bakery on the south side, the kind of place you could pass 100 times and never notice unless you were looking for it. The brass plaque by the door was faded, the lettering softened by decades of weather. J. Halton, attorney at law. I paused before going in. For a moment, I smelled my husband again. Old leather briefcase, coffee, that faint trace of peppermint he always carried in his coat pocket. This place had been part of his life, part of our life. Walking in felt like stepping into a room he'd just left. James Halton stood up the moment he saw me. Evelyn, he said softly. He was older now, thinner, but his eyes were the same, steady, observant, unafraid to look straight at discomfort. You shouldn't be driving with a face like that, he said gently. I've driven through worse, I replied. He didn't argue. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk, the same chair I'd sat in nearly 20 years ago when my husband was still alive, when the future felt negotiable. I placed my folder on the desk. Thick, heavy, 17 years of paper and proof. He didn't touch it yet. Before we talk law, he said, tell me what happened. So I did. I told him about the land, about the debts, about the dinner table, about the mashed potatoes, the spilled water, the laughter that wasn't laughter. I told him about the slaps, all 35 of them. I did not embellish. I did not soften. When I finished, his jaw was tight. That boy has lost his mind, he said. He lost it a long time ago, I replied. I just refuse to pretend this time. He nodded slowly. And you want to know what you can do. I want to know what I can do legally, I said, and what I should do morally. He sighed. Those two don't always align. Today they need to, I said. He opened the folder. For a long while, the only sound in the room was the turning of pages. He studied every receipt, every check stub, every note. Occasionally, he would hum under his breath, not approval, not doubt, but recognition. Evelyn, he said finally, leaning back, this is one of the most thoroughly documented contribution cases I've ever seen. I frowned. In English. He smiled faintly. You paid for the house. Not once, not partially, entirely. The mortgage, the renovations, the taxes, the insurance, the utilities in the early years. But the deed shows ownership, he said. It does not erase contribution, especially not when coercion or undue influence can be demonstrated. I felt my breath catch. Are you saying? I'm saying, he interrupted gently, that the house may be in his name, but it is not legally untouchable. I stared at him. For 17 years, I said quietly. I believed I had given everything away. You didn't give it away, he said. You entrusted it to the wrong person. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now, steadier than they had been in days. What about selling it? I asked. He met my eyes. That depends. If you're willing to assert equitable ownership, and if you're prepared for the fallout. What fallout? He didn't sugarcoat it. He will scream. He will threaten. He may try to shame you publicly. He will accuse you of betrayal. His wife will do the same. I nodded. They already have. James leaned forward. Once you move, there's no pretending anymore. No returning to the illusion of peace. I haven't had peace in years, I said. I've had silence. That's not the same. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. There's another thing, he said, tapping one of the documents. When the house was refinanced 8 years ago, do you remember that? Yes, I said. He said it was to lower the interest rate. It was, James replied, but he also added a clause that allowed the property to be sold without your consent, assuming you were no longer financially contributing. My chest tightened. I never stopped contributing. Exactly, he said, which means that clause is invalid. A strange sound escaped me then. Half laugh, half sob. So he tried to cut me out, I whispered. Yes, James said, quietly. I closed my eyes. The betrayal stung sharper than the slaps. The slaps were anger. This was calculation. He planned this, I said. James didn't argue. I want to sell the house, I said at last. He studied me carefully. Not transfer, not threaten, sell. Yes. To whom? Anyone who can close fast, I said. I don't want a bidding war. I want finality. He nodded slowly. You understand you'll likely sell below market. I understand, I said. This isn't about profit. It's about boundaries. James leaned back and exhaled. Then here's how we proceed. He outlined it carefully. Step by step. Notices. Title review. Emergency injunction if needed. A quiet listing through a trusted broker. You'll need to move quickly, he said. Once he suspects, he already suspects, I replied. He just doesn't believe I'll act. James's mouth curved into something like respect. People often mistake kindness for weakness, he said. They forget kindness is a choice. I gathered my papers. My hands didn't shake this time. As I stood to leave, James paused. Evelyn, he said. There's something else. I turned. You're not wrong for doing this, he said. Not legally, not morally. I swallowed. I raised him, I said. That part still hurts. Raising someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself forever, he replied. Sometimes love is letting consequences arrive on time. I nodded. Outside, the air smelled like fresh bread and cold concrete, life going on, ordinary, unbothered. I sat in my car and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The bruise had darkened, purple now, yellow at the edges. But my eyes were clear. I turned the key in the ignition and drove home knowing one thing for certain. The house was going to be sold. And for the first time since that dinner, I felt something close to peace, not because the pain was gone, but because the lie was. The phone rang before 9 a.m. It was James. Listings live, he said. We've got one cash buyer already asking for a tour. I said you'll call them back. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat still for a long time. The house wasn't even mine on paper, but just the act of preparing to sell it made the air around me feel heavier, like I'd disturbed something sacred. But sacred to who? To him? To them? Certainly not to me, not anymore. I pulled the curtains open and stared across the street. Mrs. Lindell was watering her geraniums. Mr. Tuck was walking his dog like clockwork, and just like I feared, they noticed. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. And I knew. They had heard. News traveled fast in this neighborhood, not official news, but the kind that bloomed in whispers, spread between church pews and supermarket aisles. The kind with just enough truth to sting and enough poison to wound. I didn't need a newspaper to know how the story was being told. Evelyn Carter is trying to take her own son's house. After everything he did for her. Poor Marissa. That old woman never liked her anyway. I heard she's not right anymore, not since her husband passed. I'd heard variations of these lines before, usually about other women, but they all ended the same way the woman becomes the problem. Not the slap, not the manipulation, not the gaslighting. Just the woman, too loud, too bitter, too proud. I spent that day making preparations, called the buyer, arranged a private viewing, gathered the last of the documents James needed, took one last picture of the house from across the street just for myself. But I avoided going near it. My name wasn't on the deed, but my fingerprints were on every inch of that porch. That house had held birthdays, grief, laughter, silence. It had known the sound of Deshawn's first steps and the thud of my husband's last breath. I didn't need to stand inside to know what lived there. It lived in me. Late that afternoon, I went to the grocery store. I wore sunglasses and a scarf not to hide my face, but to keep myself from making eye contact. And even then, I felt the heat of their looks. At the deli counter, Mrs. Green didn't say hello like she usually did. She wrapped my turkey slower than normal. At the checkout, the bag boy who always offered to walk me to my car avoided my eyes. Then I saw her. Mildred Brown. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since the church fundraiser where she told me I was letting Deshawn do too much. She walked up to me with her lips pressed thin, her eyes full of something sharp. "I heard," she said. I didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "Of course you did," I said. "You hear everything." She stared at me for a long moment, then leaned in closer. "Evelyn, whatever he did, he's your boy." I nodded slowly. "Yes, he is. And I'm his mother, not his punching bag." Mildred blinked. I could tell she hadn't expected that. "You think this won't follow you?" she asked. "A mother turning against her son?" I smiled. Not cruelly, just honestly. "Let it follow," I said. "I'm not running anymore." She opened her mouth again, then closed it. I walked away before she could find something else to say. Outside, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. I stood there a minute longer than I needed to, breathing in the warm scent of asphalt and fried chicken from the corner stand. And then I saw him. Past the gas station. Leaning against a car, Deshawn. He wasn't looking at me. Not directly. But he knew I was there. He had that stance, the one he used when he was trying to look casual, but his jaw was clenched too tight to pull it off. He took a sip from a drink, then tossed the cup without finishing it. Then he walked off. No words. No scene. But I knew what he was saying. He knew. I drove home in silence. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the list again. One buyer interested. A second showing tomorrow. Paperwork ready to be filed by Friday. James said the sale could close in 2 weeks if no one interfered. If. That night, I lit a candle not for comfort, but for focus. I sat in my armchair and opened a journal I hadn't touched in years. At the top of a blank page, I wrote, Day 1, Public Shame. And beneath it, there is nothing louder than silence from people who used to smile at you. This wasn't just about a house. It wasn't even about the slaps anymore. This was about dignity. Mine. And every day they tried to take it from me, I would write it down, piece by piece, and remind myself, I still own myself. It didn't take long. Only 3 days after the listing went live, Deshawn showed up at my door. Not a call, not a message, not even a knock. Just the sound of tires crunching the gravel out front, and then his fist pounding on the door like he was the sheriff of some small town in a Western movie. I didn't answer at first. I let him knock, and knock, and knock. Then, silence. I was about to go back to the kitchen when he called out, "You really doing this, huh? Selling my damn house?" I opened the door slowly. He stood there in a black hoodie, hands in his pockets, lips curled in disgust. "It's not your house," I said. He laughed, bitter and short. "The deed says otherwise. The bank knows different. So does the law." He stepped closer. Too close. I didn't move. I wanted him to see I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "You lost your mind, Mama?" I found my backbone. He sucked his teeth. "You think this makes you strong? It makes you stupid. You're going to turn the whole family against you. Everybody's talking. You think they respect what you're doing?" "I'm not doing this for respect," I said. "I'm doing it for myself." He stared at me, jaw twitching. "You're selling me out over some land? Some house you don't even live in anymore?" "You made sure I couldn't live there," I replied. "With your fists. With your silence. With your shame." His eyes narrowed. "That was one bad night. It was 35 slaps, Deshawn." He looked away. I saw it, the flicker of guilt, the tiny ripple in the storm, but it didn't last. He turned back, sharper now. "I got creditors calling me. I got Marissa crying every night. I got people laughing behind my back. I didn't put you in debt. You put me in this situation," he yelled. "You raised me to believe you'd always be there no matter what. That you'd fix things." "And I did," I said. "For 30 years, I fixed every mess, paid every bill, covered every lie. I made myself small so you could feel big." He shook his head. "You're just bitter." "No," I said softly. "I'm finally sober. From you." He stepped back like I'd slapped him. The irony didn't escape me. "You go through with this," he said, voice low, "and I swear to God, I will never speak to you again. You'll die alone, and nobody will remember your name." I leaned against the doorframe. "Deshawn, do you hear yourself? That's not a son talking. That's a man trying to blackmail his own mother with loneliness. You brought this on yourself." "No, you brought it. With every lie, every insult, every slap." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and shoved it toward me. "What's this?" "A cease and desist," he said, "from our family lawyer." I opened it, skimmed it. Threats, words meant to scare. "I'll show this to James," I said. "You think James gives a damn about you? He's just cashing your checks." "He was your father's friend," I replied. "He remembers who paid the mortgage." Deshawn's jaw clenched. "I hope it was worth it," he muttered. "Whatever pride you're chasing, because you're about to lose everything else." I stepped forward now, so he had to lean back. "I lost everything the night you hit me," I said. "There's nothing left to lose." Then I closed the door, hard. I didn't cry. Not this time. I went back to the kitchen and picked up the folder with the listing agreement. At the back was a small section, disclosures and notices. I flipped to the last page. There was a checkbox marked, "Seller confirms full equitable contribution." James had checked it. I initialed beside it last night. That meant something, even if Deshawn refused to see it. Later that evening, Marissa called. I let it ring. Then she texted, "You're tearing this family apart. I hope you're happy." And I was tempted, just for a moment, to respond, to defend myself, to explain, but I stopped. I remembered something my mother used to say when church folks gossiped behind her back. Never argue with people committed to misunderstanding you. So I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my journal. Day 4. The knock. A man can beat your body, but when he tries to beat your memory, that's when you fight back. I closed the book and turned off the light. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreaming. Because this fight wasn't about a house. It was about the woman who built one and refused to be erased from its story. The key still fit. After all these years, through all the chaos and betrayal, it slid into the lock like a memory too stubborn to fade. I hadn't stepped inside the house in months, not since the night he hit me. The air was stale, heavy with dust and silence. But it was mine. In the way that things are yours, not because you signed for them, but because you bled into them. I had left pieces of myself in these walls, calluses on doorknobs, tears in corners, laughter long since swallowed. I stood in the entryway and let my eyes adjust. Everything looked the same. The hallway mirror still crooked, the same scuff on the baseboard from when Deshaun crashed his tricycle as a toddler, the faint smell of lemon oil and neglect. I walked slowly, like I was afraid to wake the ghosts. In the kitchen, the blinds were still half open the way I used to leave them, enough for light, not enough for heat. My hands moved on their own, pulling the dish towel off the oven handle, adjusting the salt shaker on the counter, opening the cupboard where I used to keep the good plates. I was here to meet the broker and finalize the walkthrough before the buyer's inspection, but I needed something else. Closure. I placed my purse on the kitchen table and opened the fridge. It was nearly empty, just a few condiments and a carton of milk 3 days past due. I checked the freezer, frozen chicken thighs. The pantry had rice, canned beans, a half-used bottle of hot sauce. I smiled. Just enough. Not for a party, not for guests, for me. A final supper with the only person who never walked out on me, myself. I cleaned the chicken, seasoned it the way my mother taught me. A little cayenne, garlic powder, black pepper, and salt. I cooked it slowly, let it crisp in the pan while the rice simmered, the kitchen filled with warmth, the scent wrapping around my bones like a prayer. As the rice finished, I set the table. Just one plate, one glass, one fork, and then I sat. The same chair I'd sat in for birthdays, graduations, arguments, apologies. But this time, no one sat across from me. I took my first bite and closed my eyes. It tasted like memory. I thought of my husband, how he used to sneak bites while I cooked, saying, "Evelyn, if you ever open a restaurant, I'm quitting my job and working the register." I thought of Deshaun as a boy, running in with scraped knees, yelling, "Mama, I'm bleeding! You better kiss it quick!" I thought of the Christmas we had nothing but rice and beans, and still laughed until we cried. And then I thought of now, of the man who had hit me, of the woman who stood by him, of the silence that followed. I ate slowly, savoring, letting go. After dinner, I washed the dishes, dried them, and returned them to their place. My mother always said, "Leave a place cleaner than you found it, even if it broke your heart." I walked through each room one last time. The hallway still held the faint outline of Deshaun's growth, Mark's little notches and dates etched into the paint. I touched them, then turned away. The master bedroom still had the old dresser I bought secondhand in '91. I left it. Let them sell it or burn it. I no longer wanted anything they could claim I'd stolen. In the garage, I found the rusted blue bicycle I once surprised Deshaun with after saving tip money for 6 months. I almost took it, but I didn't. Some things belong to the past. Before I left, I took one last thing from the living room drawer, a single envelope. Inside was a picture of me, my husband, and Deshaun at age 10. We were standing outside the house, arms around each other, smiling like time would never change us. I folded it, slid it into my purse. Then I locked the door behind me. I didn't look back. As I walked to my car, the broker pulled up young, chipper, clipboard in hand. "Morning, Miss Carter," she chirped. I nodded. "House is ready." She smiled. "Excited for the next step?" I paused. "I'm ready," I said. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already walking away. Because this wasn't just about signing papers or taking a check. This was about a final meal, a final memory, and the quiet, dignified end of something that once tried to define me. Tonight, I would sleep knowing that I had cooked for myself, fed my soul, and closed the chapter not with rage but with rice, chicken, and the scent of a woman who finally chose herself. Sunday came like it always did, slow, quiet, and full of expectations. I hadn't planned to go to church. Not after the gossip, not after the stares at the grocery store, but something in me refused to let them push me out of the one place that had once felt like sanctuary. So I dressed in my Sunday best navy dress, pearl earrings, the hat I wore at my husband's funeral, not to impress, to remind them I was still here, still standing. Mount Zion Baptist sat on the corner like a grandmother watching over the neighborhood. Its bricks were weathered, but the bell still rang strong at 10 a.m. I walked through the front doors and felt eyes land on me like heat from an oven. People didn't whisper. They didn't need to. They just stared. Sister Lainey clutched her husband's arm tighter. Brother Miles looked at the floor when I passed. Even the ushers gave me that tight-lipped smile, like they weren't sure whether to hand me a program or a warning. I sat in my usual spot, third pew on the right. Alone. The choir sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," and I closed my eyes, letting the melody wrap around me like a shawl. But I could still feel it, the tension, the judgment, every note dipped in side-eye. When Pastor Daniels stepped up to the pulpit, he cleared his throat longer than usual. His gaze passed over the congregation, then lingered just a breath too long on me. "I had a different message prepared today," he began, "but the Lord put something else on my heart." I knew what was coming before the first scripture fell from his mouth. "Honor thy father and mother. A house divided cannot stand. Reconciliation is the work of the righteous." It wasn't a sermon. It was a spotlight. Each verse, each parable, twisted into a weapon. He never said my name. He didn't have to. By the time he reached the altar call, my hands were clenched in my lap, my jaw tight. I had swallowed humiliation before, but not like this. After service, the real performance began. The fellowship hall buzzed with passive-aggressive love. "You all right, Evelyn? We're praying for you. I just hope Deshaun can find it in his heart to forgive you. Forgive me." As if I were the one who shattered something. As if motherhood came with a lifetime gag order. I smiled politely, nodded, took a plate of lukewarm baked macaroni I had no intention of eating. Then she approached. Clara, 82 years old, sat in the back pew since I was a teenager, wore a shawl year-round, and had a memory sharper than a butcher's knife. She walked right up to me, cane tapping softly. "Come walk with me," she said. We stepped outside, where the wind was cooler. "You know why they're upset with you?" she asked. I sighed. "Because I didn't play the part." "No," she said. "Because you reminded them it could be them. That's what happens when a woman stops being quiet." I looked at her, startled. She nodded toward the parking lot. "I was married to a man who beat me for 18 years, she said. "Sat in that church every Sunday, smiling while I wore sunglasses indoors. You know what they told me when I left him?" "What?" "That I should have prayed harder." I swallowed. "But I left anyway," she continued. "And you know what happened after that?" "What?" "Nothing. The world kept spinning, and I started sleeping again. I let the words settle. Don't let them shame you into silence, Evelyn. You didn't betray your family. You saved yourself." I looked at her then, not as an elder, but as a mirror. Clara reached into her bag and handed me a folded note. "Read that when you get home," she said. "Now go on. Hold your head up." She turned and walked back inside, cane tapping steady, like a drumbeat I hadn't heard in years. At home, I unfolded the note. Just one sentence, handwritten in steady script. "Justice is rarely loud, but it is always right on time." That night, I wrote in my journal, Day 8, the pulpit. When the righteous turn their back on truth, it's not God they're serving, it's comfort. I lit a candle, not to pray, to mark the moment. I had been shamed, but I had not been silenced. 3 days after the church service, I got the call. "Miss Carter," the broker said, her voice strained, "we've hit a snag. The buyer's attorney flagged a lien attached to the property, something about a credit line your son opened 6 years ago." My heart sank. "But that was his line of credit," I said. "I didn't even know he—" "I know," she interrupted gently, "but since the property is under his name, the lien follows the house. The buyer's lawyer is spooked, says they'll pull out if it's not cleared by the end of the week." I hung up and sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. Alien. So Deshaun had mortgaged the house again behind my back, quietly, probably to pay off one of his many business opportunities. And now, it was going to cost me everything. I called James Halton immediately. He listened, calm as always, then asked for the documents, said he'd dig into it first thing in the morning. But I couldn't wait. I drove straight to the county office, demanded a record search, and within the hour had the printout in my hand. $42, a personal credit line, tied directly to the property, signed, sealed, and dated 2 months after my husband passed. He'd waited just long enough for the morning to quiet down. I stepped out of the building and into the parking lot, heart pounding like a war drum. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from fury. He had lied again. This wasn't just about refusing to pay back. This was sabotage. I didn't drive home. I drove to his house. Marissa opened the door. She looked surprised, but not shocked, like she knew I would come eventually. "He's not here," she said. "I know," I said. "I didn't come for him." Her lips tightened. "What do you want, Evelyn?" To understand. She crossed her arms. Understand what? Why you both keep pretending I'm the enemy when I'm the only reason this roof still exists? She said nothing. I saw the lien, I said. I saw the dates. I saw the signature. Did you know? She looked away. I asked you a question. Marissa finally met my gaze. Yes, that one word landed harder than I expected. Why didn't you tell me? Because he said you wouldn't understand. I understand betrayal just fine, I snapped. Marissa sighed, stepping back from the doorway. Come inside. I hesitated, then followed. The living room was exactly as I remembered it. Staged, sterile, full of things bought on credit and pretense. The kind of home meant for guests, not for family. I didn't agree with him, Marissa said, pouring herself tea. But I didn't stop him either. Why? Because I was tired, she said. Tired of cleaning up the messes. Tired of him losing money, lying to clients, sleeping until noon. You think this version of Deshawn just happened overnight? It's been years. Then why stay? She hesitated, then gave me the answer I wasn't ready for. Because if I leave, she whispered, he'll come for me the way he's coming for you. Silence fell between us. For the first time, I saw it not just the fear in her, but the pattern, the damage, the legacy I never meant to pass on. You're scared of him, I said. Marissa nodded. Aren't you? I looked out the window. The sky was turning gray. No, I said finally. I'm angry, and I'm done being quiet. When I got home, James had already emailed me a plan. The lien could be challenged, especially if I could prove Deshawn had opened it without informing me and that I had made all the payments on the house. But it would take time. Time I didn't have. The buyer's deadline was 2 days away. That night, I barely slept. I paced. I prayed. I cursed. I cried. And then I remembered something an envelope my husband once tucked behind our wedding photo. Said it was, just in case. I dug through my closet, through boxes of old linens and forgotten grief, and found it. Inside, a notarized letter from him, dated 6 months before he died. To whom it may concern, my wife, Evelyn Carter, is the sole financial contributor to the property located at 2446 Garvey Street. Though the title is in our son's name for estate planning purposes, she is the true and rightful owner by virtue of full monetary and upkeep contributions. This statement is made freely and truthfully. His signature, a witness, a notary seal. I stared at it like a lifeline. I scanned it, emailed it to James. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. Evelyn, he said, voice filled with awe. This changes everything. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. Not grief this time. Relief. Can we still sell? I asked. If the buyer agrees to an extension, yes. And if we act fast. I nodded. I'll make it happen. Because I had finally learned. Sometimes, when they try to bury you in paperwork and threats, the truth doesn't come from screaming. It comes from a single sheet of paper signed in love. James called first thing in the morning. The buyers agreed to the extension, he said. 2 more weeks. We file the letter from your husband with the county today. I'll have the title office amend the records by Friday. I closed my eyes. 2 more weeks. A window of grace. A sliver of justice. Thank you, I whispered. He paused. Evelyn, that letter. I've done this 30 years. I've never seen anything quite like it. He was trying to protect you. I smiled through the ache in my chest. I think he always was. I just didn't know how much. After the call, I made tea. Strong, black, no sugar. The kind I used to drink before life became too bitter on its own. Then I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my reflection in the window. Outside, the street was wet from the night's rain. Inside, my heart still felt damp from memories I hadn't let surface in years. That night, I dreamed of the old house. Not the one I was trying to sell. The one before that. A narrow little shotgun home with chipped green shutters and a front porch that creaked when you breathed too hard. Deshawn had been born there, in the middle of a July heat wave. No AC, just a fan, a tub of cold water, and my husband's hand wrapped tight around mine. I remembered the way Deshawn cried that first night. Loud, demanding, like he already expected the world to listen. And I had listened. For years. Every scrape, every worry, every tantrum I tended to them, like sacred fires. I postponed dreams, passed up promotions, skipped vacations. I sewed clothes, packed lunches, kept quiet when the credit cards rang out my name. It wasn't martyrdom. It was love. But somewhere along the way, Deshawn stopped listening back. I remembered a time when I wanted to open a little catering business. I had recipes, a borrowed stove, a friend willing to split rent on a kitchen downtown. But Deshawn had just gotten into trouble at school. We needed a lawyer. Then he crashed his car. Then he dropped out of community college. And the dream got smaller, until it disappeared altogether. In the dream, I stood in that old kitchen, apron on, flour on my cheek. My hands moved, but the stove was gone. The counters were empty. I turned to speak, but my voice didn't come out. Only Deshawn's voice. "You owe me, Mama." I woke up with my heart pounding, sweat on my neck, the sheets tangled like vines. I sat up, pressing my palms into my thighs. That voice. It hadn't come from the dream. It had come from my life. He had said it once, years ago, in the middle of an argument about tuition and rent. I had brushed it off, but now it echoed like a verdict. "You owe me." As if my womb was a loan account, as if my years of sacrifice were a down payment on his recklessness. I stood and went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face. In the mirror, my eyes stared back older, yes, but not weaker. That dream had shown me something I hadn't wanted to admit. It wasn't just the house Deshawn tried to take. It was the dream of who I was supposed to be. He hadn't just taken space. He had taken silence and filled it with his noise. He had taken my trust and gambled it away. He had taken my future and shaped it in his image. But no more. That morning, I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Carter's Table, Southern Meals, Done Right." Underneath it, a list. Fried catfish with rosemary grits, black-eyed peas with smoked turkey, sweet potato pound cake with pecan glaze. I smiled. It wasn't a business plan. Not yet. But it was something he couldn't touch. A dream, reborn. I emailed James again, confirming the next steps. Then I reached out to the buyer personally, thanking her for the extension, promising transparency. She replied warmly. "I believe in stories like yours," she wrote. "I'm in no rush. Let's do this right." I sat in my chair and exhaled. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving Deshawn's damage. I was building something beyond it. Because when they try to steal your house, your money, your voice, you rebuild from the inside out. One plate, one dream, one page at a time. He came back on a Wednesday. The air was still, the clouds hanging low like the sky wasn't sure whether to cry or hold back. I was on the porch, trimming my rose bushes, something I hadn't done in months. My hands, finally steady, worked quietly. Then his car pulled up. Deshawn stepped out slowly, not with the usual swagger, but with something else. Calculated humility. I didn't speak. I let him walk up the path like a man headed to court. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at me. "You got a minute?" he asked. "I've got 5, I replied, not stopping my trimming. He nodded, then took a seat on the top step like he used to when he was little and in trouble. There was a long silence between us. Then he said, "I've been thinking. That'd be new," I murmured. He smiled a little. "I deserved that." I put down my shears and looked at him. "No, Deshawn, you deserve a lot more than that. But I'm tired of giving." He nodded slowly, then rubbed his hands together. "I came to say I'm sorry." The words hung there, awkward, ill-fitted. I waited. For what? Exactly. For hitting you, for yelling, for embarrassing you, for being ungrateful. I haven't been right lately. I've been stressed. I'm not proud of what I did. I studied his face. He wasn't crying. His voice didn't tremble. But he was doing that thing he used to do as a kid when lying to get out of trouble, pulling his sleeves over his hands like he was cold. I crossed my arms. "I accept your apology," I said. "But I don't forget abuse." He looked down. "I know." "No, you don't," I said sharply. "You think this is about one bad night. It's not. This is about years of you thinking you were entitled to every piece of me, my money, my name, my silence." He didn't answer. Then he stood up, stepped closer. "I'm not proud of what I did," he repeated. "But maybe we can fix it. Together. You don't have to sell. We can figure something out." I narrowed my eyes. "There it is," I said. "The real reason for the apology." He froze. "You didn't come to make peace. You came to negotiate." "Mama, you never called me that after you hit me. Not once. But now that the papers are being filed and the lawyer is moving, suddenly I'm Mama again?" He looked away, jaw tight. "I'm trying, okay? I'm here. And I'm done." I turned to pick up my shears again, but he reached for my hand. It wasn't rough. It wasn't violent. But it was still too much. I pulled back. "Don't touch me unless it's in healing," I said softly. He exhaled hard, then stepped back. His expression changed like a mask slipping. "What if I lose everything?" he asked, bitterness seeping in. "You want that? You want your son living out of his car?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I already lost everything the day you slapped me 35 times in front of your wife's family. That boy I raised, he's already gone." He flinched. "Don't say that." "Then stop making it true." He stood there for a long time. Then, voice cooler now, he said, "You'll regret this. When you're old and alone, when you need somebody." I smiled. "I needed someone when you hit me. All I had was my own 2 hands. Turns out they're enough." He opened his mouth, closed it, then walked down the steps. He paused at the bottom. "I tried," he said. "No," I corrected. "You tried to delay." He got in his car and pulled away. I sat back in my rocking chair, heart pounding but not from fear, from fire. That night, the lock on my front door got changed. James called again, updating me on the title amendment. "Looks like the buyer's sticking. Just need to finalize county paperwork next week." I nodded. But something kept nagging at me. That look Deshaun gave me before leaving, it wasn't final. It was strategic. He wasn't done. And I knew him too well to ignore the storm in his eyes. So I prepared. I scanned every document again, stored backups in the cloud, and in a flash drive I tucked inside my Bible. I moved important items to a storage unit under my name only. I let the local police know of a past domestic situation, just in case. Because apologies don't erase patterns. And I knew now Deshaun was never coming to reconcile. He was circling, waiting, like a wolf watching a fence line for weakness. But I wasn't prey. Not anymore. Before I went to bed, I lit my candle again, and I wrote in my journal, Day 11, The Pretender. Sometimes, the people who break you the most are the ones who claim they're just trying to fix you. Then I wrote one more sentence. I forgive him, but I don't unlock the door. I spent the morning in the shed, the old one behind the house, the kind nobody notices unless they're looking for a rake or a rusted bicycle. It smelled of mildew and pine cleaner, the way it always had, and the floor creaked underfoot like it remembered every argument that had spilled out the back door. I had come to clean it out, not because the buyer asked, but because I wanted to decide what stayed, what went, and what never should have stayed this long. The dust came up in clouds as I pulled old boxes from the shelves. There were baby clothes, stained with time. A box of cassette tapes labeled Sermons, 1993-97. A half-finished quilt I swore I'd complete before Deshaun turned 12. He's 32 now. I laughed softly at that. In one of the far corners, beneath a pile of old curtains, I found something I hadn't touched in years, my wedding dress. It was wrapped in plastic, yellowed and brittle, the lace frayed at the edges. I sat on the stool and unwrapped it slowly. It wasn't white anymore, more like memory-colored off-white, faded, like the smile I wore that day. I remember how I'd felt walking down that aisle, terrified, hopeful, alone in a room full of witnesses. My father was already gone, and my mother had whispered before I walked out, "Choose peace, even if you have to make it yourself." I had tried, and now, all these years later, I realized something. I had never stopped choosing peace. I had just chosen it for everyone but me. I folded the dress gently and placed it in a clean box. That's when I heard the knock, not on the door, but on the fence. Subtle, 2 quick taps, then a voice. "Miss Evelyn? You out here?" It was Henry Jennings, my neighbor of 16 years. A retired postman with knees that cracked like popcorn and a heart too big for his flannel shirts. I stepped outside. "You okay?" he asked, frowning. "Didn't want to spook you." I nodded. "Just doing some cleaning. What's wrong?" He hesitated. Saw Deshawn the other night. I stiffened. Where? Back at the Garvey house. After dark. He parked in the alley and went around the back. Had something under his arm. Maybe tools, maybe a folder. He didn't stay long, but I thought you should know. I exhaled slowly, my hands clenched before I told them to relax. Thanks, Henry, I appreciate it. You want me to drive by a few times this week? Just in case? That'd mean a lot. He nodded. I got you. And Evelyn? Yeah? You ain't wrong to protect yourself. Don't let nobody in this town tell you different. I smiled. That night, I called James. He wasn't surprised. Legally, he can't do anything without your permission, James said. And if he's trying to intimidate you, that's harassment. We can file a restraining order if needed. I shook my head. Not yet. Let's wait. But I am installing cameras. And I did. By morning, I had security cameras facing the front door, back gate, and side alley. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done pretending bad things don't happen to people who pray. I also changed the locks on the Garvey house. Again. The agent had keys. James had copies. Deshawn did not. That afternoon, I returned to the shed and found an old photo album I hadn't opened in decades. I sat down right there on the floor and flipped through page after page: birthdays, cookouts, back-to-school mornings. Then I reached a photo I'd forgotten existed. Deshawn, age 6, standing beside me at my old stove. He had flour on his nose, and I had a towel slung over my shoulder. We were laughing, both of us, unposed, real. That boy, he hadn't been born broken. He had been loved, fiercely. And still, somehow, we ended up here. I closed the album. My heart wasn't hard, just guarded. I wasn't seeking revenge, just release. That night, I dreamt again. Not of anger, but of silence. I was standing in the empty Garvey house. Every room was bare. The walls echoed. But this time, I wasn't sad. I was free. I walked room to room in that dream, humming to myself. And in the last room, the kitchen there, was a note on the counter. You were right to leave. I didn't know who wrote it, but I believed it. The next morning, I made biscuits from scratch for the first time in months. Buttery, flaky, soft on the inside. I wrapped half in a towel and brought them to Henry's porch with a jar of honey. Peace offering? I said. He grinned. Ain't no war to end, but I'll eat anyway. We sat in silence, chewing. Then he looked at me and said, You know, I keep waiting for you to break down. All this mess, all this ugliness, and you just keep moving. I thought for a moment. Maybe I already did, I said. But not in public. He nodded. That's the kind of strength folks don't see, but it's the kind they remember. Before I left, he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. Wrote you something, he said. Don't laugh. I used to write poetry back in '74. I unfolded it later at home. A single line scrawled in shaky cursive. A woman becomes unbreakable the day she stops asking permission to be whole. I placed it on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote my own list. Finalize county paperwork. Confirm closing date. Order one last bouquet of lilies for the front porch. Make peace. Then walk away. Because the storm may not be over, but I had built a roof strong enough to stand through anything now. It started with a beep. A soft mechanical chime at 2:16 a.m., the kind you don't hear unless your soul's already half awake. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Another beep. I reached for the phone, opened the camera app. Motion detected, back alley, Garvey property. I tapped the feed, and there he was. Deshawn, moving in the shadows like a man who knew where the quiet corners lived. He wore a hoodie pulled low, gloves on his hands, a flashlight clenched between his teeth. He slipped past the gate with practiced ease. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to sabotage. I stared at the screen, breath caught in my throat. My first instinct was to call the police. My second was to wait to see what he would do, to know what I was up against. But I didn't have the luxury of risk anymore. I dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Units are en route, ma'am. Stay on the line. By the time they arrived, Deshawn was gone. Nothing broken, no locks picked, just the back gate left ajar, swaying like a secret. The officer took my statement, barely hiding the skepticism behind his polite smile. You sure it was him? I watched him on the live feed. He scribbled notes, then promised to follow up, promised to increase patrols. But I knew the truth. By the time police show up, the worst has already knocked. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made tea and sat in my kitchen with the lights off, the only illumination coming from the flicker of the candle on the table. My journal lay open in front of me. Day 13, the shadow. Even snakes slither home when they smell fear. But I'm no longer soft ground. Then I turned the page and wrote something else. A letter. Not to Deshawn. To myself. If anything happens, I want the world to know I did not break quietly. I did not fold beneath the weight of guilt he tried to place on my shoulders. I did not let abuse become inheritance. I fought. With silence. Yes. With patience. Yes. But I fought. And that makes me free. I folded the letter, placed it in the envelope marked "Read in case of emergency," and tucked it into the top drawer beside my Bible. Not because I expected to die, but because I expected war. By morning, James had already emailed me a revised legal motion, one that included a cease and desist order and an affidavit attaching Deshawn to potential interference. "This gives us more leverage," James said. "If he steps foot on either property again, we can have him arrested." I nodded slowly. "He will?" James paused. "You sure?" Deshawn doesn't lose quietly. I could feel the shift coming. Not in the wind, not in the sky. In my bones. The kind of change that tells a woman to sleep with her keys close and her shoes by the bed. The kind that whispers, "This chapter isn't closing without one last page catching fire." Later that day, I visited the Garvey house for what was supposed to be the final pre-sale inspection. The buyer was scheduled to walk through with her husband. I arrived early. The rooms felt different. Lighter somehow. Like the weight had lifted once Deshawn left the last time. I opened all the windows. Let the light in. Lit another candle on the kitchen counter. Then I sat in the living room and waited. And waited. But the buyer never came. At first, I thought it was traffic. Then, a flat tire. But when an hour passed, I called. Voicemail. Then I got the email. "We're backing out. We're sorry, but after recent concerns and external pressures, we're not comfortable proceeding." I stared at the screen. My hand didn't shake, but my chest did. He had gotten to them. I didn't know how. Maybe a call, maybe lies, maybe threats. But it was him. I called James. His voice was tight. "This isn't over," he said. "We'll file harassment. We'll find another buyer." I nodded. But in my gut, I knew. Deshawn wasn't playing anymore. He was hunting, and I had a decision to make. Stand my ground or set the match myself. That night, I cooked again. Not for comfort. For clarity. I needed to remember who I was, what I'd built. I set one plate, poured one glass of sweet tea, and ate slowly. Each bite reminded me, I am still here. Afterward, I took out the lockbox from my closet. Inside, the deed copy, the letter from my husband, the motion from James, the journal entries, the notarized receipts of every payment I'd made on that house. Proof. Of ownership. Of truth. Of survival. I placed them all in a new envelope. Labeled it. For the day they try to erase me. Then I looked in the mirror and said aloud, I see you, Evelyn Carter. I see what they tried to do, and I see what you're about to do. Because there are two ways to end a story. You wait for the villain to fall. Or you become the one who pushes. It started with a headline. Mother slapped 35 times by son sells home in silent protest. Underneath, a black and white photo of me, standing on the porch of the Garvey house, arms crossed, chin high. I hadn't expected it to go viral. The article was meant for the Lincoln Times, a local print that usually covered church fundraisers and high school football games. But the reporter, a young black woman named Tasha Green, had asked if she could tell my story, not the legal details, but the heart of it. I had hesitated, but something inside me said, let them see you. So I told her everything, about the 35 slaps, the tattered silence, the lie about the lien, the apology with strings attached, and the quiet rebuilding of a dream no one thought I deserved. She listened. She cried. She took notes like a scribe recording gospel. Then she published it on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Messages from women in Kansas, Georgia, Oregon. I've never told anyone my son hit me. You're stronger than I'll ever be. Thank you for making me feel seen." The neighborhood, once cold and judgmental, shifted. Sister Lainey brought a pecan pie. Brother Miles mowed my lawn without asking. Even the pastor left a voicemail. "Evelyn, I owe you an apology. The church failed you, but I want to make it right." I didn't call back. Not yet. But I smiled. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't something I had to defend. It stood on its own. Then came the TV interview. Tasha forwarded the request. "CBS Local wants to do a segment. Just 5 minutes. Human interest." I said yes. Not because I wanted to be a symbol, but because I was tired of hiding pain behind curtains. The segment aired on a Thursday. I wore the same navy dress, the same pearl earrings, looked into the camera and said, "My name is Evelyn Carter. I raised my son with love, and when he raised his hand to me, I chose to raise my voice." Deshaun saw it. I knew because he called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You lied about me to the whole damn world." I deleted it. Then he texted, "They don't know what really happened. You're ruining my life." I didn't respond. Because his life wasn't ruined. It was revealed. 2 days later, he showed up outside my gate. Didn't come in. Just stood there, angry, exhausted, unraveling, holding a printed copy of the article in one hand and a beer in the other. "Congratulations," he slurred. "You got your little moment." I stepped outside, arms folded. "No, Deshaun. I got my dignity." He threw the paper at the ground. "You made me look like a monster. You did that all by yourself." His face twisted. For a moment, I thought he might climb the gate. But then he laughed, bitter, sharp. "You always loved attention. Guess you finally got it." "No," I said. "I always wanted peace. Attention found me when silence stopped working." He pointed at the house. That was supposed to be my legacy. "No," I said again. "It was my sacrifice, and you treated it like a vending machine." He looked at me, something breaking behind his eyes. "Everybody hates me now." I stared at him, long and hard. "No, Deshaun. They finally see you. That's not hate. That's clarity." He didn't speak after that, just turned and walked away, head low, beer forgotten in the grass. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I went back inside and finished a letter I had started earlier that morning. To women like me, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to shrink to keep the peace. You don't have to stay in rooms where love only flows one way. Let them call you dramatic. Let them call you selfish. Let them call you angry. But never again let them call you voiceless. Signed, Evelyn Carter, still standing. That night, my story hit national Twitter. Number Justice for Evelyn trended for 8 hours. But I didn't log on. I was in my kitchen, icing a pound cake for Henry's birthday, humming Sam Cooke, thinking about how far I'd come. The sale had been delayed, yes, but not denied. And I had learned something more valuable than ownership. I owned my truth. The papers came in a manila envelope, thick and sharp-edged, as if they knew they were meant to cut. James handed them to me with a sigh. "Emergency petition filed this morning," he said. "Deshaun is formally contesting the sale." I didn't speak. Just opened the folder and scanned the bolded phrases. Temporary injunction. Claimant, Deshaun Carter. Grounds. Emotional distress, asset mismanagement, breach of family trust. Family trust. I let the words roll through me like bad weather. "He's arguing," James continued, "that the house was placed in his name with the understanding it would be protected as a family legacy, and that your attempt to sell it is a breach of that verbal agreement." I scoffed. What verbal agreement? I was the one making payments. I was the one fixing broken pipes and patching the roof during hurricanes. All he did was show up for Thanksgiving. James nodded. "It won't hold in court. We have the notarized letter, the payment records, your husband's statement, but he's not trying to win. He's trying to stall." I sat down, fingers curled around the edge of the table. Stalling. Always stalling? Deshaun didn't want justice. He wanted control. Even now, even after everything. I closed the folder and looked out the window. It was cloudy again. Virginia spring always danced between renewal and regret. "I should have known," I murmured. "The moment we put the deed in his name, I should have known." James hesitated. "Why did you?" The question landed like a stone in my chest. I closed my eyes. And suddenly, I was back in the old kitchen, the one before Garvey Street. My husband, Leon, sitting at the table with a cup of black coffee and a stack of envelopes, his hands calloused from roofing, his smile worn but warm. "I think it's time," he had said. "We put the next house in Deshawn's name. It'll build credit. Give him responsibility." I had hesitated then. He's still reckless, still spending more than he earns. Leon had reached over, covered my hand with his. "That's why we guide him. This is how we teach legacy." Legacy. That word, so full of hope, so empty in hindsight. We had meant to empower him. Instead, we'd armed him. Back in the present, I sighed. It was Leon's idea. For estate planning, tax reasons, we thought we were giving him a head start. James tapped the folder. "He's using it like a finish line." The phone rang just then. It was the real estate agent. "The backup buyer pulled out," she said. "They're spooked by the legal filing." I thanked her, hung up, and walked out to the porch. The rocking chair creaked beneath me. Not old age, just memory. Across the street, Henry waved from his truck. "You holding up?" I nodded. He walked over and sat on the steps. "Saw the news. Folks are rallying around you. That's something." "It is," I said, "but it doesn't pay the lawyer bills." He chuckled. "I'd start a GoFundMe for you myself, but you'd curse me out." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I just wanted to end this with dignity, quietly. No headlines, no courtrooms. "Quiet doesn't always mean peace," he said. "Sometimes silence is just pain with a bow on it." I looked at him. "That's a good line." "I stole it from a blues song," he said with a grin. We sat in silence for a bit, listening to the wind rattle through the pecan trees. Then I said something I hadn't told anyone, not even James. "I think I'm scared." Henry looked at me, not surprised, not judgmental. "Of what?" "That I gave him the weapon he's using against me." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but you're still standing." "I don't feel strong." "You don't have to. You just have to keep choosing what's right." That night, I went through my journals. Page after page of pain, but also plans, dreams I had shelved, recipes I never tried, quotes from women who survived worse. I found one I'd copied from Maya Angelou. "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." I underlined it, twice. Then I took out a fresh sheet of paper. This time, I didn't write a letter. I wrote a statement. To the court, to the public, to Deshawn. A declaration of ownership not just of the house, but of the story. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am a mother, a widow, and a woman who paid for her peace in monthly installments. I gave my son a name, a future, a foundation, and he tried to bury me in it, but I dug myself out. This house was never his legacy. It was mine, and legacies are not stolen. They're reclaimed. The next morning, I handed the statement to James. He read it, then looked up with glassy eyes. "I'll include it in our response," he said. "It might not be legal language, but it's power." I nodded, because sometimes the truth doesn't come with commas and clauses. Sometimes it comes with resolve. I had given Deshawn a home. Now I would take back my name. The courtroom was cold, not from temperature, but from silence, the kind that settles in rooms where justice pretends to be impartial. I sat on the right side, James beside me, documents in hand. Deshawn sat on the left, in a blue suit too expensive for someone drowning in debt. He wore the face of a victim, polished, poised, performed. The judge was a woman mid-60s, silver hair swept into a tight knot, eyes sharp as gavelwood. Her nameplate read, Honorable Rebecca Harlan. She looked up from the file and cleared her throat. "We're here today to address the emergency injunction filed by Mr. Deshawn Carter, seeking to prevent the sale of 419 Garvey Street." James stood. "Your Honor, we're prepared to respond." But before he could continue, Deshawn's attorney jumped in. "Your Honor, my client seeks to preserve what has always been a shared family asset. He is concerned about his mother's mental fitness, the emotional stress she's under, and the sudden decisions she's made since becoming somewhat of a local celebrity." I flinched, not because of the accusation, but because of the ease with which it rolled off his tongue, as if rewriting a woman's grief into instability was routine. Deshawn didn't look at me once. James rose calmly. Your Honor, we have submitted affidavits, payment records, and a notarized letter from the deceased spouse confirming that the home was funded and maintained solely by Mrs. Carter. There is no legal basis for the injunction. There is no trust, no joint ownership, only years of sacrifice cloaked in a mother's name. The judge turned to Deshawn. Mr. Carter, do you have anything you wish to say directly? He stood and lied. Your Honor, he began, voice trembling just enough. This house was meant to be mine. My father said so. My mother agreed, and I've always considered it part of my future. I made mistakes, but I didn't deserve to be cut out of something that was promised to me. I watched him, stunned by the performance, the subtle catch in his voice, the glance toward the gallery, where a few of his in-laws sat like paid extras. Then the judge turned to me. Mrs. Carter, would you like to respond? James touched my arm lightly, prepared to speak for me, but I stood, slowly. My knees ached, my back stiff, but I stood, because some truths need a voice, not a lawyer. Your Honor, I began, I am not mentally unwell. I am not confused. I am not grieving so deeply that I forgot the facts of my life. I glanced at Deshawn. I remember every mortgage payment I made under his name because I believed in second chances. I remember every lie I forgave, every bill I covered, every emergency I handled with hands calloused from a lifetime of care. I looked back to the judge. What my son calls a shared legacy was, in truth, a shared illusion. One that I built, one he enjoyed, one he now seeks to control. There was a pause. I let it sit. Then I continued. Love made me generous. Abuse made me wise. This house does not belong to him because I no longer belong to his manipulations. The room was still. Even the court reporter paused her typing. I did not ask to be on the news. I did not ask for applause. All I ever asked was peace. And when my own son put his hands on me in front of his family, peace became something I had to fight for. I inhaled. I am not here to shame him. I am here to reclaim what I gave freely and what he mistook for weakness. The judge watched me carefully. I looked her square in the eye. This house isn't an asset. It's a burial ground for every dream I postponed, every meal I skipped, every bruise I hid with foundation and prayer. And I refuse respectfully to let the courts gift wrap it for someone who never earned the deed, the debt, or the dignity. Silence again. Then the judge leaned forward. Thank you, Mrs. Carter. You may sit. I did, James whispered. That was better than any motion I could have filed. 20 minutes later, the ruling came down. Injunction denied. The respondent retains full legal authority to proceed with sale. Further harassment will result in criminal contempt. Deshawn stood, eyes wild, lips parted. He looked at me for the first time in weeks. You just embarrassed me in front of the whole town. I looked back, voice low. No, Deshawn, you did that all by yourself. I just stopped covering for it. I walked out before him, head high, back straight. And as I stepped into the sunlight, reporters waiting, microphones raised, I said nothing, because justice had already spoken. The morning I left Garvey Street, the sky was merciful, clear, soft, the kind of blue that made you believe in fresh starts. Boxes lined the porch like memories waiting for permission to move on. The lilies in the front planter were still blooming, stubborn as ever white, radiant, defiantly alive. Henry arrived first, carrying bagels and a thermos of coffee. You sure you don't need help with the U-Haul? I shook my head. The movers are coming in an hour. I just needed one more walk-through. He handed me the coffee, then stepped back to give me space. I walked the house slowly, room by room, touching walls I had painted myself, staring out windows I had once wiped with cheap vinegar because I couldn't afford fancy cleaner. In the kitchen, the table was gone, but the dent from where Deshawn's plate had hit the floor that night still remained like a scar on a battlefield. I didn't run my fingers over it. Some wounds don't need to be touched again to be remembered. In my bedroom, the closet was empty. Only the outline of my dresser remained, a shadow where a life once sat, and in the corner, taped to the mirror, was an envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just one word written in rushed ink. Mom. I stared at it for a moment. I didn't pick it up right away. When I finally did, I opened it slowly, like lifting the lid off something dead but still twitching. Inside, a single piece of paper. No apology. No signature. Just a scribbled sentence. You didn't have to humiliate me. That was it. No, sorry. No, I was wrong. No, I understand now. Just accusation. Still centered on himself. I folded it once, then twice, then placed it on the counter beside the empty cookie jar. I didn't need to carry that with me. Outside, Sister Lainey was pulling into the driveway, tears already on her cheeks. You better promise to send a Christmas card, she said, pressing a Tupperware of yams into my hands. Every year, I smiled. By mid-morning, the porch looked like a reunion. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months came by, some with pies, others with handshakes. Even the pastor came, offering a soft, respectful nod and saying nothing. That was enough. We stood together under the pecan tree. The last time. James arrived with final paperwork. It's done, he said. Sale closed. Title transferred. He handed me the pen. I signed. Not with hesitation, but with grace. Henry loaded the final box into the truck and closed the latch with a loud, final clank. I stood on the porch one last time. This house saw the worst of me, I said aloud, and I still made it a home. Then I turned, stepped down, and walked away. No look back. Because not every chapter deserves a farewell. Some just need to end. My new house is small. A 2-bedroom cottage painted the color of seafoam, with a porch that creaks in rhythm with the breeze, and a garden just big enough for tomatoes, rosemary, and the sunflowers I never dared to plant before. It's not grand. It doesn't need to be, because it's mine. No shared deeds. No quiet resentment tucked under floorboards. No memories that slap me awake at 2 a.m. Just peace. The kind that doesn't ask for explanation. It's been 3 months since I left Garvey Street. The movers unpacked the last box by noon that first day, and I spent the evening barefoot in the kitchen, playing Sam Cooke on the radio and baking cornbread that tasted like childhood. The next morning, the mail arrived with no threats inside. That felt like a miracle. I've joined the local book club, though I mostly listen more than talk. There's a woman named Lorraine who brings sweet tea in a thermos and swears her cats understand human speech. There's Gerald, a retired math teacher who always wears suspenders and never remembers where he left his glasses. They don't know my story. They just know me. And that's a gift I never thought I'd receive this late in life. Sometimes I walk to the shoreline and talk to the ocean, tell it everything I used to scream into pillows. I imagine the waves carrying my words out to a place where silence is not punishment, but sanctuary. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap and began to write. Not a letter. A story. My story. Not the version Deshawn tells. Not the one whispered by neighbors in pews and parking lots. But the truth, shaped in my own hands. There was a woman who chose her son every time, until she chose herself. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't loud. She simply got tired of bleeding and calling it love. So she stopped. And the world didn't end. It just got quiet enough for her to hear her own name again. I titled it, No One's Mother. Because that's how I feel here. Not someone's burden. Not someone's second chance. Just Evelyn. Whole. Free. And finally, home. Sometimes, love requires letting go not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Evelyn's story teaches us that forgiveness does not mean surrender, and silence is not the same as peace. A mother's heart can be boundless, but even it must draw a line when love turns into harm. In reclaiming her voice and her dignity, Evelyn reminds us, no matter our age, our pain, or our past, we are allowed to choose ourselves.